Okay, hi everyone. I think we'll get underway. So thanks very much for coming along to today's Climate Services for Agriculture webinar for the WA sheep wheat pilot region. I'm Kylie Dunstan from FarmLink. We're helping out with the stakeholder engagement with the Bureau of Meteorology and CSIRO under the Future Drought Fund. We've got with us today Mike Funnell from the Bureau of Meteorology as our presenter, along with Luke Shelley, who is there as well. Now, questions are welcome as Mike presents throughout the day. So if you just raise your hand just down there in the bottom panel, and then I can allow you to speak. Otherwise, you can just pop them into the question and answer box and we can read them in there as well, whichever way you want to do it. A little bit later, we'll also have Tanya from the Grower Group Alliance, who's been helping us out today. She'll come along and give us a little update on the Drought Innovation Hub as well. So anyway, I'll hand over to Mike to get going.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you, Kylie, for that introduction. It's great to see so many people take time out of their day and come along, so thank you. I'll get started shortly, but a little bit about myself. I've been with the Bureau for over 10 years, got a pretty varied background in the marine services, aviation forecasting, regional forecasting, and now the agricultural unit. So I guess that's my way of saying, as today goes on, feel free to sort of hit us with whatever questions are front and centre. But this is a pretty exciting piece of work that we're undertaking with CSIRO and with assistance from FarmLink and of course the Bureau. I'll start sharing my screen. And Kylie, if you can just confirm that that's come through.
Yep, looks great.
Okay, wonderful. And yeah, as Kylie said, please do ask questions as the afternoon goes on. What could also be quite interesting for us is if you do put questions in the chat or you ask, let us know where you're at, where you are at, and also what the seasonal conditions are like where you're at, because I understand, yeah, it's been a pretty good start to the season over in the southwest. And yeah, hopefully you've escaped the worst of the wild weather the last few days. So Climate Services for Agriculture. As I mentioned before, it's in conjunction with CSIRO, and they've done a lot of incredible work to get us to where we are today. And I'd also like to just put a shout out to Luke Shelley, who's with us online from the Bureau, and Al Hawksford, who have done a lot of the heavy lifting to date as well. I'll start with an acknowledgement of country, as I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. I'm here on Guringai country, the land of the Gadigal people in northern Sydney. I'd also like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land that we are gathered, including in southwest Australia, of the Noongar people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. As we support Australians with information that they will need to live within their natural environment, may we also pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. Last time we did a webinar, we didn't actually have the prototype up and running. So this is a sort of more exciting, I guess, from our point of view, that we've actually got something for you guys to have a look at, interact with and give us feedback. So later on, I will get to the prototype, but I guess I just wanted to show that as a bit of a teaser that we do actually have something today. I know that quite often you get asked for your time and it's still at that sort of design phase, but really we are on the first step of this journey, and I will have something to show you later on. So today I'll give you an overview of what Climate Services for Agriculture is, do a little bit of a background on Australia's changing climate, give you an indication of where we're at, and just reiterate that this is the beginning. So it's not too late for you to give us feedback. That will help with the co-design. We're going to go in quite deep one-on-one with people that are interested, and there'll be plenty of time for questions as well. So broadly speaking, the Climate Services for Agriculture, which you will hear some people refer to as CSA, is aimed to help farm businesses plan for the impacts of future climate variability, including droughts on the Australian landscape. And it's about having an interactive platform that you can pull the information that you need. 4 pilot regions have been established to engage people working in agriculture in the co-design. So the 4 main areas are up in the North Queensland dry tropics, the northern tablelands of New South Wales, around the Mallee, focused on sort of Mildura and surrounds, and then the southwest Western Australian sheep wheat belt. So the programs, we've been around as a sort of dedicated agricultural unit for a few years now, and it's become quite clear that the producers out there are interested in better understanding the climate risk in the regions that they operate in. And if agriculture aspires to be this sort of $1 billion sector by 2030, climate risk is going to have to be managed by all producers. So the goal of CSA is to raise your awareness of climate, your resilience risks, and the opportunities for your farming business. It's part of the Future Drought Fund, and it's about collaborating with hubs across the country. And the Climate Service for Agriculture will underpin another piece of work called the Drought Resilience Self-Assessment Tool, which is also in the build phase. It's looking to build resilience and to uplift skills and adoption out there in the farming community. You'll hear me come back to co-design several times today. The goal of this is for it to be usable by all farmers and their advisors, and it's not too late to have input for what that looks like. It's not aimed at being a service for researchers, it's a service designed for the decision makers. So Australia's changing climate. Most of the images that you'll see over the next couple of slides come out of the State of the Climate for 2020, which is a joint publication with the Bureau and CSIRO. So I guess one of the key points of that publication is the rainfall trends, particularly through the southern growing season. So that map there is the last 20 years. You can see there's around about, well, it's lowest on record for some parts, but when we drill into southwest Australia, you're looking at around about a 16% decrease in April to October rainfall figures. Coupled with frequency of extreme heat, you're starting to sort of get a picture of drier winter and autumn and winter periods and rising heat. Okay, if we drill in a bit further, and these are case studies coming out of the body of work with the climate and weather guides, we start to see some interesting trends. So in the Meriden case study, we've got rainfall decreased in autumn, but slightly increasing slightly in spring in the last 30 years. So while the growing seasons decreased marginally, you've got some increases in the spring, and also you can see that sort of shift in the January patterns. So obviously, and then when you come across the salmon gums, which, you know, the blue bars, you're coming away from that sort of bell-shaped curve that you're familiar with and starting to see a bit of a leveling out on monthly rainfall for the last 30-year period as opposed to the 30 years before that. We did get asked in a previous webinar, you know, why these periods, why 1959 to 88 and then 89 to 2018? The simple answer is it gives producers the opportunity to reference a period of time that they're familiar with, being the current period, the last 30 years, against a known period 30 years prior, and then allows the projections to go out 30 years from today. So it's just a very, very neat way. There's no particular reason why, no bias identified. It's just a nice, simple way for producers to sort of see the historical, the current, and the projections.
So Mike, you might just see there, Anna is asking, what is the variability like for these two periods of data?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a great one, and the state of the climate really goes in to identify those higher rainfall events as well. So that will sort of, that there will be increased variability because of the more intense rainfall periods. So if you've got a warming climate, you've got an atmosphere that's capable of holding more water vapor, and as a result, you will get increased, particularly in the summer months. So if you look at those two case studies, of course, January is quite a low base anyway for your part of the world, but at Salmon Gums, when you see essentially a doubling of summer rainfall, you know, they're the sort of trends and patterns that producers may want to look at in more detail. When we go to the prototype, I will just spend a few moments in a locality in New South Wales I'm very familiar with, because it's really quite interesting to see the adaptation that's already happening there. So yeah, absolutely variability, but for the purpose of these graphs, it's simply just average rainfall that we're looking at. So yeah, it's just Salmon Gums before I move on. You've got the rainfall in late autumn and early winter decreasing, while there's also that slight increase in spring that we saw at Merredin. And then the increase in summer rains, an extra 47 mils on average over the summer months over the last 30 years. The main thing to realise that this program, Climate Services for Agriculture, is not about sort of headline statements. It's acknowledging that the changes are different in every location and will have different local impacts. Frost risk is an interesting one, and I'll just go through, you know, the X and the Y axes just so you can get a sense of what this is actually pulling out. So while the frost risks per days per week obviously are in the sort of the points, if you sort of multiply that out over a season, there is some significance. And one thing that we pulled out of the climate and weather guides was the number of potential frosts have increased at Northam and Lake Carmody. But the more interesting thing is just how sort of clear that was between the springs following a dry winter and the springs following a wet winter. So again, I think if you're on the ground, you get a sense of that, but just to actually quantify it was quite interesting. So on average, Northam had 3 frost nights in the spring following a dry winter, and just the 2 frost nights per spring following a wet winter. And then if you look at Lake Carmody, you'll also see that while Northam's frost risk has typically ended by the 3rd week of September, you've got Lake Carmody's experiencing frost through October as well. As far as temperatures go, this is another one that I think that producers are very aware of. Just those extra hot days. So whatever you set your threshold at, if you're able to look at historic data versus sort of the last 30 years, the most locations, or certainly the 4 pilot areas we're looking at, have seen an increase. And then you've also got those real sort of severe weather temperatures. So for periods above 38 degrees, there's an extra 3 days per year. And then since 1989, you've got the 6 instances of temperatures of 45 degrees or above, whereas the only time in the previous 30 years was just a single day in 1980. We can take that out and then look at temperature humidity index for livestock, and this one shows Wongan Hills Research Station and the number of days with THI of 80 or over, which represents moderate to severe stress. And again, you'll see that sort of trend working up over the last 30 years. So we know the trends. Marine heat waves obviously relevant for your part of the world as well. We saw, I think, a marine heat wave as recently as January off WA. So we know what we're seeing. I think that's sort of fairly well documented. But this is a project about how we can better communicate that, make it accessible, the data, so producers can actually interrogate it and identify what it means for their sort of paddock location. So where are we up to? As I said, we've been out over the last few years asking producers, farmers, sectors about the sort of information that we need to consider when we're producing products for the agricultural industry. We know that farming is all about decision making. These decisions have financial, social, environmental implications for the farmers who are trying to maximise every opportunity. We understand the timeframes and the different timeframes that are important. So we've obviously got the operational, which is ours today, which, you know, our traditional radar and 7-day forecast cover. Tactical in terms of multi-week to seasonal forecasts, and then the strategic, which goes beyond that. It's pretty clear farmers want to make informed decisions. And that sort of leads to how to find, interpret and trust all the information that's out there. So by working with CSIRO, we feel like this is an opportunity to come together and ensure that information is reliable and relevant. And that sources of information, while they're currently, or they can be fragmented and don't provide the whole picture, we're looking at trying to bring everything together in terms of the climate element in any rate. We hear that forecasts and trends are frequently disconnected from the agricultural decision-making process, and we're trying to understand how we can do that better. And of course, we know there's a massive amount of sources in the marketplace. So with this information behind us, we know that collaboration is going to be the key from here. We understand that primary producers already collaborate extensively with their peers, benchmarking groups, advisors, financiers, you know, through the chain, and that these advisors do deliver the value to producers. So we want producers, we want the advisors all in the room to help us, really get this right. So the feedback, and you can please, if I'm telling you feedback here today, that doesn't mean that you can't give it to us again. But already we've gained feedback that farmers seek a centralised platform that provides short, medium, and long-term forecasts in the one location. We know that farmers are already adapting and responding to short-term opportunities, but it would indicate not so much to the long-term risk. In its current form, the prototype would not be a day-to-day tool. So when I show you the prototype, it's not showing you sort of what's happening tomorrow, or it hasn't yet incorporated the seasonal forecast. But again, we're all ears. The next sort of not 12 months, but beyond that, we'll be looking at hopefully catering for mobile devices. Been given plenty of feedback that's critical for this. And we need to do more to demonstrate the long-term value of climate information to agriculture. So the mock-up on the right is an example of the initial mock-up, and that's the sort of feedback we got that this came from. The dashboard idea was unanimously liked by participants, but understand that it needs further refinement. We've got historical weather data that plays an important role alongside the forecasts, and also to validate both personal observations and past predictions. So I guess that's what, with the drilling down to the case studies, we know that producers are broadly aware of what's happening in their local environment, but this is a way of quantifying that and also maintaining sort of a record of what is happening. More feedback was around about users seeking more flexibility to set time parameters, and that probably goes back to that initial question of being able to identify, you know, where variability comes into play. You know, if you take out a few of the big years, what difference does that make? So we do understand that the 30, 30 and 30 concept that we came up with, that users are seeking a little more flexibility than that. All right, so I'm pretty keen to open up and show you the prototype, and then I'll probably ask for a few suggestions on locations where we can sort of drill into it a little further. So I'll just try to bring up a live web browser. Okay, I believe you can see that now. Earlier I just said I might just flip back to New South Wales for a very brief period, and that's because it's an area I know, and we've had an opportunity to get out there and listen to a few producers and what the implications are. This is a locality, Gunaganu, which is, I guess, at the southern end of the Northern Tablelands, edge of the Northwest Slopes and Plains. And I thought I'd bring it up because there was really quite an interesting story of a producer that operates in this area. You'll notice sort of, as far as rainfall goes, yes, they've experienced sort of a 9-10% reduction in annual rainfall, but that alone probably wasn't causing the farm business any sort of great concern at this stage. Temperature was probably something that certainly was starting to make them step back and consider what that means. So the first view in the prototype is more that dashboard view, and then you can go through and drill into rainfall and temperature details. In this particular case, if I just pull out 2016, 17, 18, 19 and 20, the hot days above 35 degrees were about triple what the historical average had been. The 2018 drought kicked in this location, and this was a area that has always relied on groundwater quite extensively for livestock. So you had reduced rainfall, increased temperature, water security had become an issue. It's such a well-run property, they got through the drought, but what became very clear to them was that with these trends, water infrastructure was the key for their operation. So, they indicated to me what their sort of, I guess, focus was on, and that was sort of tapping into groundwater resources that, a lot of the other neighbouring areas do, but not so much on this property. And I guess the good news is, the last 18 months has been above average rainfall, but for this particular operation, just being able to drill in to historical climate and some projections was able to just give them a little bit of focus on their business model. So why don't I jump into a location that might be closer to home? Does anyone want to type in a location into the chat for us to have a look at? Oh, wonderful, thank you. Hang on, oh, now I'm getting, who was first? Who won?
I think Kari Lee with Moora.
Excellent, well done, Kari. All right, let's see now. Essentially, it's querying about, Luke might correct me if I get the number completely wrong. I think it's querying about 270 databases. So there will be a slight delay as it pulls data, but you can see it's just running across the top. We're starting to get heat data come in, frost data. We're not far off.
So just while we're waiting there, Mike, June's got a question there. Is this the on-farm rainfall records? Where is the data drawn from? Acknowledging that this can vary even on the same property.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, June. Yes, it is our observation network. So yes, of course, there'll be variability, but I am, from the feedback to date, and I should say the historical data is coming from the observations. The projections are, it's a 5-kilometre grid. So, if you're on a large property, you will get different data for elevated period, locations, beyond those 5 kilometre grids. So there is the distinction down to the farm level, and moving forward in further refinement of this product, it will be down to 1 kilometre grids as well. All right, so the data's come through. We've got a historical average of 452, and then the last 30 years, that's come back a fraction. And then projecting forward, you're sort of hovering around that sort of similar mark. So if I was to flip that to a commodity commodity specific information, it will flip the data to something like this. Now, this is where we want your feedback. So now I've switched to wheat for this, for the spot location. We've now got rainfall in terms of a growing season and a fallow season. Now, we know that we need to have these one-on-one conversations with you to establish if that's right. You know, have we got the periods, the calendar periods right? You know, is the heat risk when you need it? And you know, what's the threshold in terms of the frost risk? The goal is to have the top 5 commodities for each pilot region. So now we haven't got to the stage where we've got the livestock in here, but if we were to sort of so-called be able to click on, you know, beef or livestock, the heat risk would be then sort of skewed out into summer and what the projections for those summer periods would be. So yeah, again, this is where the conversations. So it was all about getting something up for you guys to have a look at and to critique, but very conscious that we've got the opportunity to build on it. So anyhow, I'll leave it in the wheat mode. So was it Carrie Ann? Curry Lee, sorry.
Curry Lee, yep.
So Curry Lee, does that sort of surprise you at all? Is that sort of, in terms of the growing season, a slight decrease in those sort of autumn to winter months? Is that the sort of thing that you sort of have been experiencing at a farm level?
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised that the growing season rainfall has declined. Yep, so that's probably in line with, probably what we were experiencing of late. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And if I flip back to the generic dashboard, you'll notice that the rainfall projections, there's not much movement there at all. The heat, however, there is sort of it is capturing a warming trend. So I guess that would probably be, if we were to drill down into that, we could just sort of go along. You've got the year by year breakdown, but also a trend in terms of temperatures. And I guess then that would be, be an interesting conversation to have with yourself or your advisor, or not knowing exactly which side of the fence you're on, but what that would mean for your day-to-day sort of operations as well. All right, I'll just pop in another location and keep the questions coming as well.
So there's just a follow on from June as well, saying that she's glad that it's down to smaller areas. Thank you. Will this assist in federal government understanding drought declarations as well?
Oh, I'm not sure is the simple answer. This is a program out of the Future Drought Fund. So I guess the goal is to help farmers identify their risk for the environment, the climate they operate in. I don't know if that will translate to a quicker, declaration, but certainly it's one way of displaying the information very clearly. So yeah, hopefully that helps everybody sort of be on the same page. Okay, I'll go to swing it over to Corrigan in WA, as Veronica has requested that. And And while that's loading, Veronica, I'd love to know as well, I said earlier, just sort of what are the current conditions like? And, you know, have there been any pinch points for the season so far? I was reading a sort of a little bit about the struggles with sourcing urea and the pricing. Yeah, feel free to give us a sense of what's happening on the ground in your part of the world.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, thanks.
Sure. So it's actually, the season's looking pretty good, encouraging at the moment. Obviously, growers are pretty keen to get hold of some more nitrogen to keep putting on their crops. It's actually just been raining today. In the last sort of week, we'd be looking at hitting minimum 20 mils. Guys have actually been having to worry about waterlogging, which is, you know, an issue that we haven't had for the last at least 4 years off the top of my head. Last time might have seen it was 2016. Frost is starting to creep in on everyone's mind at the moment, just with it being cooler and quite wet around at the moment. Last few years, heat stress at the end of season has been a bit of an issue because it tends to not rain in September at the moment. So we've got our fingers crossed that it carries through this year. But yeah, we would have had our annual rainfall already this year for what we've had in the last few years. So yeah,
that's incredible. And so when I showed, and I'll just go back to it briefly. When I showed the frost risk in dry years as opposed to wet years, did that surprise you at all? So for Northam, the frost risk higher in spring following a dry year as opposed to, you know, a wet winter like we're currently experiencing, having a slightly lower risk?
To be honest, nothing surprises me with frost anymore. But I'd say the last time we had really severe frost, 2016, it was a wet, cold year. But, you know, obviously frost seems to happen when you've got clearer skies. So I'd say that it wasn't a surprise for me, actually.
Yeah, okay. And sorry, just going back to 2016, was that a case as the conditions pushed later finishing crops further back into the year?
Yeah, so because we had so many frost events, it's probably a bit hard to judge in terms of pushing the crop back. But generally speaking, I'd say if it's cooler on average, you do notice that the crop maturity is a bit later here. But yeah, 16, we had over 30 frost events, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you've been commenting on the fairly dry Septembers. And I guess if you pull out the September to November figures, you can actually drill in. So all I did then was I clicked on the dashboard in the spring rainfall figures, and then it shot me down here, and then we could actually sort of see, you can have a look at the spring figures and the trends. Okay, and then you've got your projections as well. So 2030, you're looking at a medium output of 59 mils on our projections, which is essentially what you've been experiencing over the last sort of 30 to 60 years. So yeah, it just gives producers the opportunity to drill into those numbers that I guess you talk about casually, you're broadly aware of, but we're hoping that it's the sort of interactive tool that you can just drill in a few levels deeper, and just help with the planning of the business. So likewise, you've got that slight decrease in winter rainfall that sort of has occurred. And then you can have a look at your heat and your frost risk as well.
So just on that, Mike, Kathy was asking
yeah.
there, does the historical data expand, for example, temperature to give monthly data?
Hang on, I'll just, temperature, was it?
Yes.
So yes, so in terms of the thresholds for the heat risk, I'll just, so it gives you that year by year breakdown, and that blue line or the line across there is the average for the 30-year period. So there is the year on year record, and of course, like any of this data is available on our website, you know, but we're also conscious that the goal is to have an easy to use product. So if there's anything, even in our final version of Climate Services for Agriculture, if there was a particular sort of data set that wasn't captured, of course that will still sort of exist somewhere, but it's about trying to make it that balance of information versus usability.
And just another one there from Audrey. Can you please explain what the word emissions are in this context?
Yeah, sure. So I made reference to the State of the Climate publication, which is a joint CSIRO and Bureau document, and I've got the link in that presentation. That they're sort of that sort of modeling's well beyond anything I do, but that's the data set that we're working with. So that's the peer-reviewed. So what it refers to is we've got the two variables. We've got the years, so we can flick forward to 2050 and 2070, and CSR, the build of this has a medium and a high emission output. As far as what the threshold is for both of those, Luke and I were chatting about that today, and we agreed that we need to get that information out. But at this stage, I'll just have to reference people back to the State of the Climate, which goes into it in a lot of detail.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And then just one final question there for the moment from David. What is the confidence around the future climate predictions?
Yeah, I think this goes back to how we've broken it down as well. So when I keep coming back to this 30, 30 and 30 sort of outlook. The historical climate and the current climate gives us that sort of trend. And then we hope that the user gains some confidence in the future projections. So you do have a high range of outcomes just because of the probabilistic nature of it. But, you know, in really basic terms, it's about building the confidence around those, you know, if I'm looking here, so that sort of 322 mil number, that is the best estimate for the year 2020 based on all the data and the models that we've got. And we understand that is a trust thing. We're asking the producer to trust how we've got to this, and then hope that with that increased trust, you know, you will incorporate these tools sort of into your planning as well. I didn't want to skip around with seasonal information too much, but I can't help just with that, you know, talk about waterlogging and, you know, spring rainfall and whatnot. And I did just want to remind people that every Monday and Thursday, our climate outlooks on the Bureau's website are updated. And the other thing, as we talk about not getting nitrogen into the paddocks, if, for example, we were to zoom into somewhere around you guys, I'm quite amazed that people aren't aware that you can just click on the map and get a chance of outcome. So I could change that to what's the chances of getting 25 mils. Click on a map, and then you've got an outlook for, you know, a fortnight starting the 17th, and likelihood of those outcomes. So sorry, I digress. Okay, look, I've just noticed a comment from John, and I'm conscious that I always sort of go quite quickly with these things. So John, just to give you a real overview, what we've got here today is a prototype of a service, climate service agriculture, and we're looking at historical climate against the last 30 years and projecting future climate down to the paddock level for producers. I'll step out of this for a moment. We can come back to it at any stage, and I'll just come back to co-design because that's what today's sort of pitch is about. So the 4 pilot regions came about trying to identify the different sort of commodities across the country so that we can, in that prototype, develop the criteria that each of the commodities need. So next week, we're going to be chatting to cane growers up in North Queensland. Obviously, they're going to have a very different criteria, what's significant to their commodity, but we're building it all on the same platform. We've got the wheat view for the regions, including your own, but we need to better understand what information is required for sheep producers or horticulture, whatever it is. It's about recruiting participants that feel like they want to be part of it. We're not going to tie you up with too much time, but there certainly will be one-on-one conversations and yeah, sort of participate in surveys to make sure that we're hitting the mark. So the interviews will start, before too long. We'll be looking to do validation and review of those findings. We've got access to an incredible team at CSIRO that can go really deep into the user experience, and that we'll be looking to do these sort of webinars. And apologies, Luke and I had always hoped to get over to WA to do this in person, but yeah, I'm right in the thick of a lockdown at the moment, and Luke is not long out of one, so it might just be a little while before we can travel freely again. We were asked sort of what sort of time that the engagement might take, just so we're upfront. It could be sort of up to 15, 20 hours over a 6-month period, but there will be things that are optional within that, and we're not going to be marching out there during sort of in the lead up to harvest expecting you to sort of sit down and tell us your deepest feelings. It will be conscious of your time demands. So who do we want? Well, we want people that are out there making the decisions. We've had fairly good success with early adopters, and look, they'll still play a role, but it is about getting everyone involved. So if you think that a producer that's happy to give us a little bit of stick for what we don't always get right, it'd be incredible to have those people in the room, as well as I mean, I know some farmers that their level of meteorology understanding is sort of up there with pilots and trained meteorologists. So we know that knowledge exists, but it's about making sure we carry everybody along on the journey. To register interest, it's just a simple email to Kylie, who introduced the session earlier, and yeah, she'll take it from there. Plenty of time for questions if there are some.
So Mike, we've also got a poll attached to today's webinar as well. So I will launch that shortly and just ask everyone to just pop in and fill that in for us. And there's also an indication in there as well, a question about whether or not you want to be involved going forward as well. So it's another way of getting your interest in there.
Okay, while hopefully a few more questions come through, I'll go back. I think I've got Mount Magnet to have a look at for Debbie, and Susan Callering. Oh, I'm going to need help with that pronunciation. Sorry, Susan.
Yeah, that's Kalingari. Not too far from Mora.
Oh, okay. Well, it's the first one that's tripped us up because I've just typed that in and, oh, hang on, there we go. Isn't that funny? Just go. And Susan, what's your main operation out there?
We grow a lot of oat and hay,
Mm-hmm.
and there are sort of some specific unique elements that we keep an eye on in terms of the weather and the climate. And we also have got, you know, your standard grains, wheat, barley, lupins, canola, yeah, and oats and oat and hay.
Yeah, okay. Actually, that'd be fascinating if you feel that you've got time to be involved, because I think the hay part of the job is something that we, you know, don't always quite understand. And I say that because we tend to focus on the rainfall events and amounts and duration, whereas I know there are periods in the year where, you know, this week's actually quite a good example. Like I know people in southern Queensland, you know, that are trying to strip sorghum and just can't get it to dry out. Now there's a trough going through. There's likely to be another 5 to 10 mils, which will probably feel like 3 inches for them. And what they really want to know is how many dry days are behind that change. Now we've got good information on sort of our, you know, 10-day dynamic forecasts, but it's about communicating that. So the communication for them isn't so much about the next 3 or 4 days, because that 5 to 10 mils pretty much, you know, locked in. But if we can help them better understand days 6 to 10, that will be, you know, a huge advantage. And I'd imagine there'd be times in the year where that would be the case for you and your hay operations.
Yeah, that's right. The drying time. And the other critical thing, because our hay actually goes into the export market, so it has to be baled at less than 12% moisture. So the relative humidity is pretty important. You know, there's a fairly specific window in which we can bale. So accessing that information is very important.
Yeah, and have you ever looked at historical sort of relative humidity, sort of month on month and season by season, or is it mainly just that sort of forecast period data that you rely on?
Yeah, we haven't looked at the historical information around relative humidity. No, more, you know, from season to season. We've worked out how we can calculate what's going to happen over the next sort of 24 sort of 72 hours, I think they can get out to. So that's certainly improved, you know, over the years. Yeah,
and there are a few of our products that actually have humidity out to 7 days now as well. So if you're not aware of where to find that, just let Kylie know, and I'll try to get that to you.
Yeah, okay, that'd be good. Thanks.
All right. So before I throw in Mount Magnet, I'll just sort of run through this sort of display a little bit. So I know we sort of said that Susan does a lot more than just wheat, but in this display, we've got the growing period rainfall. So that, again, there's a slight decrease around that sort of 10 to sort of 12%, and holding in around that 20-30 mark, more or less. Got the heat risk, but nothing compared to, was it Corrigan that we looked at earlier? So that obviously just indicates you're a bit further west in the district. And then if I just drill into the rainfall details a bit further, you can have a look at that. And there's actually commentary here as well. So, you know, it goes into the analysis a bit deeper. It gives you sort of real figures to work with, and then gives you sort of the percentile groups as well. And that's for the growing season and the fallow rainfall. And it's been broken down into that, that output because we're on the wheat vision. If we go to the generic dashboard vision, then we've got the annual rainfall and then the seasonal rainfall to look at. So there's many ways that you can already manipulate this data, but this is just the first stop in the journey for this prototype.
So, Mike, we did have a question there. Just, oh, Luke, were you going to jump in there?
I was, yeah. Sorry, Jamie just asked, and thanks for asking actually, because we forgot about this. But yeah, the prototype is actually accessible now. So even though we're showing it to you, you are more than welcome to go and have a go yourself. And so what I've done is, I don't, Mike, did we have a slide on the link and the password? I couldn't remember. Sorry. Anyway, look, in the chat, I've just posted the link, which is climateservicesforag.indraweb.io/dashboard, and the username is CSA and the password is demo. But that's just in the chat, and so please, by all means, go and start using it, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And there are some ways. I'm pretty sure that there's a little question mark on the page somewhere where you can actually type in your feedback and that will come back through to us. Sorry to just jump in there, Mike.
No, perfect. Thanks, Luke. And yeah, I should point out Luke's been on this journey from the start, so that's why I dragged him along so he could pick up on those things. We had a question there from Veronica about interested in the break of season change. Now that's information that the climate guides certainly did dig into. So it's interesting that you've asked that, because that if that's the sort of thing that you want to see in there in sort of such a sort of I guess, a clear pattern as it was in the climate guides. That's really useful feedback as well. Thanks, Veronica. Can you see that up in my screen now?
Yep, sure can.
Well, look, the take-home messages today, you know, I really do thank people for taking an hour out of their day. Luke's right, the dashboard and the prototype are there to play with. That link should, you know, work for everybody. And then we'll also, as Kylie said in the poll, to register your interest to keep being involved. Yeah, please, if you've got time, help us. And I guess with the goal of producing something that's really useful for farmers and advisors. And yeah, just build that relationship between the Bureau, CSIRO, and yourselves.
There's just another one that's come in from Rob there. So any soil moisture modelling to be included in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great comment. We're part of, you know, we call ourselves the agriculture and water team in the Bureau. So we've got that sort of soil moisture modelling information, and yeah, I understand the significance of that info, Rob. So thank you.
And just one there from Kathy as well. Are we able to share this link to the prototype? I think that would be a great idea, Kathy. I think the more the merrier to have a look at this and just make sure that we're on track and get the right information would be fabulous.
Yeah, we're very aware that, you know, there would have been people that wanted to join today and just couldn't for any number of reasons. So please pulse it out there. And yeah, there's actually the opportunity to provide feedback. You'll see that little link in the bottom right corner. So even somebody who's not had any of the background that we've given today will be able to get that. Okay, so I've just thrown Mount Magnet in, and we've gone a fair bit further north, and you can just sort of see that, yeah, just some of those heat days starting to rise up. And I think if I click on temperature, yeah, we'll get a bit more information about those over 35-degree days. And I'd have to go. All right, Debbie, if you're still online, I'd love to know as well as if 35 sort of is the threshold for you, or whether that, you know, could be raised to 38, or if there's a sort of figure that you consider, you know, a threshold in terms of heat risk.
Don't think Debbie's online anymore, Mike. I think she's had to pop off.
Got sick of waiting for me to get Mount Magnet in there.
So Audrey's on there as well. What about runoff from rainfall events? I.e., how often will we receive rainfall events over, say, 12 mils to allow farm dam filling?
Yeah, okay, that's the first time I've had that specific feedback, but that probably ties into what we spoke about earlier on about rainfall variability and incidents of more extreme weather. So yeah, that's noted, and we'll take that as a comment.
I guess if I could just jump in there, I can see people are asking lots of questions about what will be in there and what won't. The answer to that is we will put in there what you tell us needs to be in there to help you make better decisions. So that's what the co-design that Mike's talked about today. So I guess we think of these, you know, questions as actual requests. And so what we really want to do, and we're not going to be able to answer all of those today, but what we'd like to do over the coming months is get people who are interested in being part of further online seminars, and like Mike says, we'll get over to meet people as we can, and for you to give us that feedback to say, well, actually, you know, if this system's going to help me make better decisions, then I need to see, you know, how many times we're going to get over X amount of rainfall and how that's changing and how I can manage my water resources. So I guess think of it, all of it, as this is just the start. This is the bare bones of what we've got here. We've made some attempt to put up some things that we think are relevant, but we really would like to hear that more detailed information on exactly what it is you need to make better decisions for your business going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. That's perfect way to summarise it. And Kylie, I can throw back to you. I noticed Tanya's joined us as well.
Yeah, she has. So Tanya from Grower Group Alliance has been helping us on ground, and you would all know Tanya quite well over in that patch for sure. But she was also just going to give us a little update on the Drought Innovation Hub and where that's up to. So Tanya, over to you.
Thanks, Kylie, and nice to have you online, Mike and Luke. And very sorry that you can't be in Narrogin today, because that's what we'll be able to do. But these are the times. So with the WA Southwest Hub, we're at a point where, from I guess, the operations point of view, that in the next week or so that we'll be announcing our new director, knowledge broker, and other members of staff. And so then we can start sort of, I guess, getting out and about more than we already are. But some of the activities that we've done so far is gone back to our consortia partners, just to start to understand, you know, what they want out of this hub, because it's not for GGA to say what has to be happening. It's about, as an industry, how we collaborate and really drive innovation going forward. And so Mark Holland and Graham Smith have been out talking with some of our more, I guess, some of the partners that have pledged the most, such as some of the universities, the Department of Primary Industries, and some of our larger grower groups. And then we will be sort of extending that out further. Yeah, and obviously things like the Climate Services for Ag and the DoctorSat tool development, whilst they're not in the Drought Hub program, they really align well with, you know, drought resilience and better decision making. And so they really fit nicely in terms of, you know, hub activities and how we can help those different programs get a bit of, traction, you know, in our hub, but just across the state in general and nationally. So I've been acting in the role of knowledge broker, as an interim knowledge broker for the hub for the last few weeks, or probably a month now. And so just nationally, all the hubs are probably at similar stages, and it is all about getting themselves organised. And we have a really great task ahead of us in this whole co-design. So we really want to, you know, work from the ground up, and obviously with GGA leading the Southwest Hub, it's all about our growers and grower groups and making sure that we're really, you know, understanding the priority needs of the industry from the grower perspective, and how we can sort of collaborate with our, you know, consortia partners to really drive the innovation going forward. So just over the next few months, it's really about getting ourselves sorted, and then moving into next year where we're actually having sort of on-ground activities. And that's about it, I think, Kylie, really.
Yeah, no, that's great, Tanya. I think, going forward, I think the Drought Innovation Hubs are going to play a really key role for all of us right across the whole nation, really. Mike, we just have another question in there from Alison. So the last dry season, 2018 to 2021, was in many ways lack of water issue. WA is heavily reliant on on-farm dam as water storage. We have limited groundwater.
Yeah, so it sort of goes to that last point about trying to understand, you know, or create a threshold, as I understand it, for runoff to fill dams. So I think that, as Luke said, if that's the information you need, that needs to be, you know, relayed back to us in forms like this, and we'll aim to get it in there. So thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, well, I think we're probably pretty right to wrap up now. As Mike said before, if you are interested in being involved, pop an email through to myself, Kylie at Farmly. And then also in the poll there, if you've completed that, I'll just leave it open for a little bit longer. But yeah, by all means, go and have a look at the prototype. And give plenty of feedback. That's the most important thing, I think, at this stage, is just to make sure that we get people on board, and, you know, to make sure that we know the really important things that you need for your on-farm decision making. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Kylie. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. And I hope Luke and I do get to meet you in person and have those one-on-one conversations.